In the complex and often treacherous world of international politics, stories of resilience, survival, and defiance often emerge from leaders who refuse to bow to pressure. Among these stories, the case of Ibrahim Traoré, the youngest leader in Africa and head of Burkina Faso, stands out as one of the most remarkable. His journey in recent years has not only reshaped the political landscape of the Sahel, but has also drawn global attention for reasons both inspiring and alarming. What many outside the continent may not fully realize is that since coming to power, Traoré has been the target of an extraordinary number of assassination attempts, at least 18 by some counts. Each of these attempts has carried with it not only danger for his own life, but also seismic implications for Burkina Faso, for West Africa, and for the ongoing struggle between old colonial power structures and the continent's emerging independence. The shocking truth behind these attempts tells a story of international intrigue, competing interests, betrayal, resilience, and above all, the determination of one man to resist becoming another casualty of the status quo. To understand why Ibrahim Traoré has found himself in the crosshairs so many times, one must first revisit the context of Burkina Faso's recent history. The country, like much of the Sahel, has endured decades of instability, terrorism, and economic hardship, much of it rooted in colonial legacies and the deliberate underdevelopment of African states. Traoré's rise to power in 2022 through a popular military-led transition marked a dramatic break from the political elite who had long managed Burkina Faso in ways more favorable to outside powers than to its people. His message was clear: Burkina Faso would reclaim sovereignty over its resources, its decisions, and its destiny. This alone was enough to attract enemies. Western powers, particularly those with deep interests in Africa's natural wealth, were alarmed at his refusal to align with traditional economic and security partnerships. Traoré began to distance Burkina Faso from France, the former colonial power, and questioned the influence of institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which have historically been accused of imposing exploitative debt structures. Furthermore, he positioned his country as a central player in the alliance of Sahel states alongside Mali and Niger, nations that had also rejected foreign military dominance in their internal security. This shift represented more than rhetoric. It was a reordering of regional priorities that aimed to give Africans, not Paris, Brussels, or Washington, the final word in how their nations are governed. It is against this backdrop that the assassination attempts began to multiply. The first attempts were subtle, almost deniable, wrapped in the language of political instability. Reports of mutinies, whispers of dissent among the ranks of the armed forces, and suspicious attacks near military convoys raised early alarms. In the political climate of the Sahel, such disturbances are often not what they seem. Analysts suggest that many of these early plots were facilitated by external actors hoping to sow discord within Traoré's support base, to fracture his fragile coalition, or to make him appear weak. But the young leader proved more resilient than expected. Rather than folding under the pressure, he doubled down, making speeches that electrified the youth of Burkina Faso and gave voice to frustrations long suppressed. The assassination attempts did not remain subtle for long. Soon, credible intelligence pointed to organized plots involving highly trained operatives, advanced weaponry, and international coordination. There were reports of convoys attacked with precision, incidents of explosives planted along routes where Traoré was expected to travel, and even attempts to poison him through insiders close to his administration. Each failure only heightened the sense that powerful forces were determined to remove him from the scene. What makes this all the more astonishing is that Traoré is not a leader with decades of entrenched power or vast global influence. He is, by all accounts, a young revolutionary still carving out his space on the global stage. The sheer persistence of those attempting to kill him reveals not just personal animosity, but fear of what he represents. At the heart of that fear lies the symbolism of his youth. At just his mid-30s, Traoré represents a new generation of African leadership unwilling to be confined by the playbooks of the past. His defiance is not that of an aging revolutionary clinging to the remnants of anti-colonial fervor. It is instead the fresh, forward-looking assertion that Africa can and must rewrite its place in the global order. For a continent where the highest average age is under 20, this carries enormous symbolic weight. His survival in the face of assassination attempts has only amplified this symbolism, transforming him into a figure larger than himself, a kind of living metaphor for Africa's refusal to be silenced. But symbols alone do not account for the ferocity of these plots. There are tangible stakes as well. Burkina Faso is resource-rich, particularly in gold. By asserting control over resource contracts and attempting to redirect the profits of mining into national development rather than multinational coffers, Traoré disrupted lucrative arrangements that had enriched foreign corporations for decades. Each ton of gold that no longer flows cheaply to foreign vaults represents millions in lost profit for powerful entities. Each renegotiated contract sends ripples across an entire industry accustomed to having its way. For those whose interests are threatened, eliminating the leader becomes a pragmatic calculation. The geopolitical layer adds further complexity. By aligning more closely with non-Western powers such as Russia and China, and exploring partnerships within Africa itself, Traoré openly defied the global order that has long kept African states tethered to Western dominance. His embrace of multipolarity, his insistence that Africans could defend their own borders and secure their own prosperity, challenged more than just economic interests. It challenged the ideological foundation of Western foreign policy in Africa. From this perspective, assassination attempts can be seen not only as efforts to protect financial gains, but also as desperate maneuvers to preserve a crumbling system of control. Inside Burkina Faso, these attempts have also exposed the fragility of loyalty in a nation under siege. Several of the attempts are believed to have involved insiders, members of the military or political apparatus, who were either bought, coerced, or ideologically opposed to Traoré's trajectory. This internal dimension makes his survival all the more remarkable. Trust in such an environment is scarce. Each day requires not just vigilance against external enemies, but also scrutiny of those standing closest to him. In many ways, surviving 18 attempts is not simply a testament to personal luck or security measures. It is a reflection of an ability to navigate treacherous internal politics with a keen sense of timing and instinct. Internationally, the repeated attempts on Traoré's life have not gone unnoticed. Across Africa, they have reinforced his reputation as a hero of resistance. In the streets of Ouagadougou, in Bamako, in Niamey, and in countless other African cities, his image has become a rallying point for those demanding sovereignty and dignity. Protesters carry his portrait alongside slogans calling for the end of foreign exploitation. His name is spoken in the same breath as those of earlier revolutionaries like Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, and Kwame Nkrumah, leaders who themselves were cut down by assassination before realizing their visions. Traoré's continued survival, in contrast, feels like a kind of poetic justice, a rare case where history seems to be giving a second chance. In Europe and America, the narrative is more complicated. On one hand, officials insist on their commitment to stability and democracy in the Sahel. On the other hand, the relentless nature of the assassination attempts raises uncomfortable questions. Are these truly organic acts of resistance to Traoré's policies, or are they part of a larger pattern of covert operations designed to keep Africa within its prescribed place? The lack of transparency around these events, combined with a historical record of foreign interference in Africa, leaves many unconvinced by official denials. The psychological toll on Traoré himself must also be acknowledged. To wake up each day knowing that powerful forces want you dead requires not just courage, but a certain kind of resolve that borders on the extraordinary. Yet in public appearances, he exudes calm, composure, and determination. Rather than retreating into paranoia or isolation, he has used each failed attempt as fuel, turning it into another opportunity to remind his people of the stakes. In speeches, he has invoked the names of past African martyrs, insisting that, if his destiny is to fall, it will be in the service of freedom. This blending of personal vulnerability with collective strength has only deepened the loyalty he commands among the youth of Burkina Faso. What is perhaps most shocking of all is the silence that surrounds these assassination attempts in much of the global media. 18 attempts on the life of a sitting head of state should be front-page news across the world, yet coverage remains sporadic and muted. When reported, the narratives are often clouded in doubt or buried under discussions of instability rather than directly confronting the scale of what is happening. This selective reporting raises further suspicions. Is the world simply unwilling to acknowledge the lengths to which some are willing to go to preserve control over Africa's destiny? Or is the silence itself a form of complicity? Looking ahead, the survival of Ibrahim Traoré carries immense implications. Should he continue to evade these assassination plots, his symbolic stature will only grow, both in Africa and globally. Each failed attempt strengthens his narrative as a leader protected by the will of the people, and perhaps, as some suggest, by destiny itself. But the dangers remain real. History offers sobering reminders of how often Africa's boldest leaders have been silenced just as they began to reshape the future. For now, the shocking truth remains that Ibrahim Traoré, the youngest leader on the African continent, has endured more than 18 assassination attempts in barely a few years. His story is not only one of personal survival, but also of continental awakening. In him, many Africans see a reflection of their own struggles for dignity, sovereignty, and self-determination. For his enemies, he represents a threat too dangerous to leave unchecked. And for the world at large, his survival poses a question few are willing to confront directly. If a young leader can withstand this much pressure and still rise stronger, what might Africa achieve when it fully claims its independence? In the final analysis, the repeated attempts on his life reveal more about the fear of his adversaries than about his own vulnerabilities. Ibrahim Traoré has become, willingly or not, a symbol of Africa's unfinished revolution. His continued survival defies not just bullets and bombs, but the very logic of a world order built on keeping Africa subdued. And as long as he breathes, as long as he leads, that world order trembles with uncertainty.